At some point, in every video game series, there comes a time when the story has to end. No tale can be told forever. People love resolutions, and seeing characters come back is nice, but there's also something people love about seeing them go. There's a finality to it, and Yakuza 6 surely wouldn't be the last game in the Yakuza series, but it would mark the end for Kiryu's story. This entry also greatly increased the series' graphics and engine. It would be a huge stepping stone for the series moving forward, and would also be leaving the past in the past. Today, I'll be going in depth with Yakuza 6, talking about story, gameplay, mechanics, and everything else in between. If you haven't seen my previous videos on the Yakuza series, I would highly recommend that you check them out to get solid context for the story we'll be talking about today. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so over on Patreon, where I upload longer versions of my full retrospectives and weekly text updates. If you want to support the channel for free, you can give this video a like and subscribe to the channel, as it really helps me out. Spoilers for Yakuza 6. Hey Dad, it's me, your favorite son, and today I want to talk about Yakuza 6. Hey Dad. Before we get into the video, I'd like to welcome you to my unfinished green screen setup. I'm here today to talk to you about our sponsor, Factor. Factor is a meal delivery service that provides you with fresh, dietitian-approved meals right to your doorstep. They're now owned by HelloFresh, which means they have a ton of meals to choose from. They're fantastic for someone like me who has no time, and it means there's even less prep than usual. The meals are ready to go. You just have to heat them up, which takes less than 3 minutes, and you're ready to eat. They'll also sit nicely with those fitness goals because they have calorie-smart, keto, veggie, and vegan options. Factor saves me a ton of time, and on top of that, they're delicious, like this French pea stew chicken that I ate. It quickly turns from this into this. You can put it on a plate, or you can stand in your kitchen beside your ring light and eat it in front of a GoPro.
That's good chicken. Damn, this is actually pretty good.
They also have these little smoothies that are great, quick, and low calorie. I like to enjoy them for breakfast, with my meals, or while standing in my kitchen filming an ad for Factor.
That's yummy.
Head to go.factor75.com/favoriteson130. and use code FAVORITESON130 to get $130 off across 6 boxes. That's a ton of money. So again, that's go.factor75.com/favoriteson130 and use code FAVORITESON130 to get $130 off across 6 boxes. Now back to Kamurocho, Dad. Yakuza 6 was announced at the Tokyo Game Show in September of 2015. One of the big announcements for the game was that many professional wrestlers would be playing characters in this entry, as well as Takeshi Kitano, the famed Japanese comedian and filmmaker. The game was developed on a completely new engine, called the Dragon Engine. This is the same engine that we talked about when looking at Yakuza Kiwami 2. It would greatly improve the graphics, visuals, and allowed for many things like seamlessly entering buildings. A lot of the system would also greatly be changed with the introduction of this engine. Yakuza 6 would also return to a single protagonist, something that had been foreign to the Yakuza series since Yakuza 3. Writer and producer Masayoshi Yokoyama said in an interview about the game that he had to get used to writing a story for one protagonist again. Yokoyama wanted to create a new story this time around, and focus on Kiryu's connection to a new life, rather than the same old rescue tale he had already told. The team also wanted to focus on smaller areas this time around. They went for small areas of large cities, jam-packed with content, rather than something like Yakuza 5, where you had large areas with lots of things blocked off. Yakuza 6 was released in Japan on December 8th, 2016, and released worldwide on April 17th, 2018 for the PlayStation 4. As always, a note before we get into things. If you haven't seen my previous videos in the series, I have a specific structure when approaching a Yakuza game. Yakuza is known for its incredible main story and gameplay, but it's also known for its absolute massive amount of side content to get lost in. Because of this, I will first detail the story and gameplay in depth, and then at the end I will venture back to go through all of the side content that this entry has to offer. I like to call this side content distractions, because it's so easy to get lost in these mini-games and forget about the main story. Yakuza 6 begins with Kiryu sitting at a bar. This prologue moment is filled with mystery. The woman running the bar is asking Kiryu if it's time yet, but he says that he, who we don't know yet, can wait. Just then, Nagumo, a new character, comes into the bar and begins chastising Kiryu. He wants to fight him outside and we defeat the man. Kiryu gets pissed at Nagumo for making him late and he heads back into the bar. There, Kiryu begins prepping a bottle and gives it to the person that was waiting, a child in a basket. Who these people are around Kiryu, where he is, what he's doing, and who the baby is are all questions unanswered, but we surely can tell that Kiryu is in a situation that we haven't seen him in before. We jump back 4 years, back to the events of Yakuza 5, when Haruka ended her idol career by telling the public that Kiryu, a former Yakuza, is her family. After the ending of that game, Haruka got Kiryu to a hospital. Akiyama shows up and tells Haruka that Kiryu will get through this and he'll be okay. He also gives her a warning here. Life isn't going to be the same after she made her announcement. The Tojo and the Omi are at each other's throats. Akiyama plans to go into hiding until things cool off, and Haruka is planning on taking Kiryu back to the orphanage once he's better. Some police, led by Date, show up and confront Majima and Saejima. Saejima believes that the squad is here for him because he's still an escaped prisoner. This is true, but they're also here to arrest Kiryu for assault and destruction of property. Haruka, Date, and Akiyama are at New Sedona watching the news, which is reporting on Kiryu's arrest. Kiryu is being used as a scapegoat for the Tokyo PD. They're using him to make up for not preventing the war between the Omi and the Tojo. They can't just go out and arrest Daigo or Majima, any of the big heads of the clan, but Kiryu is technically outside of all that. They're using him to get some credibility back. Date thinks a lawyer can get Kiryu out of serving time, but that depends on what Kiryu decides. We're back to Kiryu at this point, and he's dreaming of an ethereal beach. We can walk up to each of the familiar characters from previous entries, and Kiryu will remember all of the major events involving them. This mainly seemed like a way to bring people up to speed on the characters that would be involved in the story, without retelling all of the events of the games. When Kiryu wakes up, Daigo is waiting to talk to him. Kiryu has decided that he wants to serve his time, to absolve himself of the guilt and clear his conscience. This will also allow him to be free of all of his business with the Tojo clan. Daigo wonders what the children will do without him, and Kiryu believes that Haruka will be able to handle them while he's gone. We jump 6 months ahead, and Haruka is visiting Kiryu in jail. Haruka has been taking care of the children since Kiryu has been inside, and everything is going well. The Okinawan community is even pitching in while he's gone. The media has started to cool off as well. Another reason Kiryu is doing all of this is so that he can be proud to be close to Haruka. Paying his time will redeem him in the public eye as well. Haruka has also realized that she truly loves Kiryu, and their separation has confirmed all that. Back at the orphanage, Mitsuo has gotten great news. He's earned a large baseball scholarship. Koji thinks that the orphanage might get in the way of it being granted, though. That night, Haruka sees tabloids posting online about her and the kids. The next day, she decides to leave, packing up her bags. Ayako catches her, and she says she's leaving to try and get closer to Kiryu. She tells Ayako to not tell any of the kids what happened and leaves the island. Back in Kamurocho, we see little Asia being burned down. Date is on the scene and thinks it's arson. In the Millennium Tower, some Tojo clan men are watching the blaze and toast to the revival of the Tojo clan. We jump forward at this point into the first official chapter of the game. We're in this game's present day, December 2016. Kiryu is getting out of jail and heads back to the orphanage. When he gets back, the kids are asking him where Haruka is. She was supposed to be with Kiryu, but he hasn't heard from her. Ayako reveals her conversation with the girl before she left. Kiryu decides to make this right and find Haruka, who the kids think might be in Kamurocho. He decides to call Akiyama at Sky Finance, but only gets a dead number. I have to say, it's kind of insane to see the kids as grown up as they are. I'm sure this was the effect that the developers wanted this section to have. We're growing over time with Kiryu. He's probably thinking the same thing when looking at the kids, but almost 10 years later, we see them all grown up, and it makes you realize how much time has passed. We finally head back to Kamurocho, and at this point in the game, we're blocked off from exploring the city. Upon arriving, he finds Date in the streets. He's investigating the murder of a Tojo man at the hands of a Chinese immigrant. The Tojo is currently at war with the Sayo Triad, a Chinese mafia that's taken over Little Asia 3 years ago. The tensions escalated and eventually civilians were involved. Tokyo PD were forced to find someone to blame and pinned it on the Tojo, with Daigo and Majima being arrested. Katsumi Sugai is now in charge of the Tojo while the two are gone. Date tells Kiryu to stay out of the whole thing, because this is what got him put back in jail. Kiryu tells Date that he's looking for Haruka and was hoping that Akiyama would have some information. Unfortunately, Akiyama closed Sky Finance a while back, so Date doesn't think he'll be there. Kiryu heads to the building anyway and doesn't find Akiyama. No one really knows anything about Akiyama or Haruka, so Kiryu eventually ends up in Little Asia, which has been greatly transformed since the last time that we saw it. A Tojo higher-up was sent to negotiate with the Chinese mafia, specifically a goon by the name of Ed. The Tojo man is thrown out and some Triad members attack Kiryu. He defeats them and the men tell him nothing. The Tojo associate recognizes Kiryu though and rushes off to tell Sugai that he's back in town. Kiryu heads back to Sky Finance, nowhere else to go, but some Chinese mafia members are about to kill a Tojo man. Kiryu beats the guys down, rescuing him. Apparently, Tojo members are being targeted all over, and Kiryu assumes this is why Akiyama went into hiding in the first place. The Tojo guy says that he saw Akiyama with some homeless men in the children's park. Before Kiryu leaves, the man introduces himself as Morota, and Kiryu tells the man his name, which he doesn't believe. At the children's park, a homeless man wants lunch in exchange for information on Akiyama. We have to head to a convenience store and buy him a bento box. He leads Kiryu into the sewers and we find Akiyama sleeping inside of a box. Akiyama says that he shut down Sky Finance when the Triad men started coming after him. He even had to send Hana back to her family in the countryside so that she didn't get hurt. He doesn't know anything about Haruka, and just as Kiryu is leaving, the two men are accosted by Ed, the Triad member, and his goons. This is our first real boss battle of the game, so it's about time we talk about Yakuza 6's combat. Yakuza 6 is a huge departure from the previous entries in the series. It functions quite a lot like Yakuza Kiwami 2, both games sharing the same engine and general combat style. All of the basics we know are the same, light and heavy attacks mixed together to create finishing moves. We can use heat actions which commence when pressing triangle at the indicated moment. I do have a bit of an issue with heat actions in this game because they can be a bit fussy. Yakuza has always had a slight issue with the indicator for heat actions not popping up when it feels like they should. If we have a heat action that can be triggered by standing in front of an enemy with a gun, then sometimes it just won't show up. Yakuza 6 is really bad with this, and it seemed like it was pretty difficult to get heat actions to trigger. We can quick step as usual and block to mitigate damage received. The Dragon Engine greatly upgrades almost everything about Yakuza 6. It makes the game look absolutely gorgeous. An insane amount of fidelity and style are presented in this entry, and the game just looks so good. But I don't think this entry upgrades the combat very much. If anything, it's a slight decline. I really don't mind the simplicity because, as you can tell, they've gotten rid of the styles in this entry. No separate characters to play, and Kiryu doesn't have 3 battle stances he can take. It's not that big of a deal, and I like the idea of a return to simplicity and form for Kiryu in his last entry. The thing I don't like is the way that combat feels. Because we don't have many stances, basic combos are going to be our bread and butter, but everything just feels so slow in this entry. Our attacks are slow in the first place, and when an enemy blocks, it's even worse. In previous entries, you could combo through a block, and even if you didn't hit the opponent, your character would keep attacking. But now, Kiryu sort of recoils after hitting an enemy that blocks. It's incredibly annoying and slows down the pace of combat overall. Kiryu does have a ton of upgrades at his disposal, so he can actually get quicker in combat, but even at full combat speed, the whole system still feels pretty sluggish. This would all be fine if it was compensated for by having Kiryu do a lot of damage, but that's not the case. At the start of the game, we do barely any damage, and it seems like enemies have a ton of health. The game isn't hard at all, but it just takes forever to defeat enemies. It feels like all of the battles take way too long. Speaking of upgrades, the upgrade system has been greatly changed with the new entry and reflects the system that we saw in Yakuza Kiwami 2. Kiryu has 5 different types of experience: strength, agility, spirit, technique, and charm. We can spend these points to upgrade our base stats like health, attack, defense, evasion, and heat gauge. We can also spend it to unlock skills in 3 categories: battle, heat, and other. Battle skills are mostly new types of attacks like charged punches or tiger drop. Heat upgrades are generally new heat actions or upgrades to the amount of heat bar that we have. Other skills are everything relating to experience gain, money gain, the hunger gauge, or the mini-games. We can get experience in many different ways by completing main missions, sub-stories, defeating enemies, or eating food. Food is an incredibly important part of this entry because eating a good meal and getting good combinations will give you a bunch of experience. You can't eat when you're full though. Once Kiryu's hunger gauge is maxed out, he can eat, but he won't gain health or experience. I love this upgrade system so much. It's a shame that it's wasted on a slightly lacking combat system because the RPG elements that it introduces are so good. I've always thought Yakuza would be served so greatly by sliding slightly towards the RPG genre. None of the battles in this game are particularly tough. I would actually put this entry as one of the easiest in the series, but Ed is dealt with quite quickly. This is mostly because we have Akiyama fighting with us, making the battle much simpler. After defeating Ed, he doesn't like the fact that we teamed up on him, even though he had tons of goons that he brought along. As the two are leaving the sewers, Date calls Kiryu and reveals some terrible news. Haruka was in a car accident and she's in the hospital. At the hospital, Date is there with Hanjo, another officer. Haruka is in the ICU. She has a broken hip, shoulder, and head trauma. The whole thing was a hit and run, but the biggest news is that Haruka was carrying a baby, the child that we saw in the flash forward from the prologue. Date quickly confirms our suspicions, identifying the child as Haruto Sawamura, Haruka's son. Kiryu is wondering where the father must be, but Hanjo says there are no leads as of yet. Kiryu wants to go to the scene of the crime, but Hanjo is hesitant to take him there. He just looks at Kiryu like he's from a bygone era, a Yakuza that doesn't matter anymore. Kiryu thinks that the hit and run might be someone trying to get to him, and after some persistence, Hanjo takes Kiryu to Senryo Avenue, where Haruka was hit. Hanjo tells Kiryu about what happened. Haruka was hit from behind by a black sedan that came gunning out of a parking garage nearby. The driver fled the scene, and Hanjo thinks that he must have been running from something related to the Yakuza Triad War. 3 months ago, the man that was supposed to be handed the Sayo Triad, Jimmy Lowe, was killed in Kamurocho. The Chinese blamed this on the Tojo, and the Tojo came back at the Triad, chaos erupting in the city. New syndicates have begun to flood into Kamurocho now, including the Jingwan Mafia, now back in full force. We have to investigate the crime scene here, looking at the different pieces and trying to get a better picture of what happened. Hanjo seems to decide that the driver must not have been after Haruka, as he sped up after hitting her. Someone is spying on Kiryu, and we have to chase after him. This is technically a chase, but Yakuza 6 has done away with the classic chases that we know and replaced it with just running. I don't really like this as much, even though there's some better set pieces here. When we catch the man, he reveals that he's with the Someya family of the Tojo clan. He was told to keep an eye on Kiryu and make sure he's safe. The Tojo already know about Haruka's accident, and Kiryu wants to talk to the patriarch of the Someya family. Apparently, the Tojo are meeting at the HQ, which means Kiryu is going to have to head back there. At this point, Kiryu is just frustrated with constantly being pulled into Yakuza affairs. He even went to prison for 4 years just so that he could get away, once and for all. But here he is again, getting pulled right back in. At the Tojo HQ, Kiryu finds Takumi Someya. He begins to apologize, but before that, acting chairman Sugai wants to speak with Kiryu. Sugai knew about Haruka's accident because of her time as an idol and her high status, as well as her relationship to Kiryu. He sent a man out to keep an eye on Kiryu to make sure he wasn't killed in the chaos between the Chinese mafia and the Tojo. Kiryu gives a firm warning that if anyone lays a hand on his family, he'll bring the Tojo down for good. When Kiryu gets back to the hospital, it's more bad news. Nojiri, a man from Child Protective Services, is there. He's about to take Haruto because the child is now in the protection of the state, seeing as Haruka has no legal family. He can't give the child over to Kiryu because he's not technically related to Haruka, and he's also an ex-con. Kiryu heads to the nursery. He's going to take Haruto because he's the only one that can truly protect him until Haruka wakes up. Of course, Kiryu can protect Haruto, and if Haruka never wakes up, Haruto will be stuck in the system. But the public, the police, and CPS aren't going to see it like that. Kiryu is a very recent ex-con and an ex-Yakuza. It'll just look like he stole a child and he'll be back in prison again. Akiyama tries to stop Kiryu and we have to fight him. Destroying cribs and bassinets in a child's room is pretty funny. He's not that strong, but like every other boss, takes forever to defeat. Kiryu leaves with Haruto and heads back to Kamurocho. Kiryu stops at a convenience store to get some food, but Date sees him and helps him get baby formula. Date takes Kiryu to New Sedona, and he tells him that Nojiri is basically off of Kiryu's tail. Date promised to take the fall if anything happens to the child. Haruka just went through a major surgery and is still unconscious. The police pulled a picture from her phone, and it was taken in Hiroshima, specifically the town of Onimichi. Because Date thinks she spent her 3 years there, that must mean the father of Haruto is there as well. Kiryu wants to go to Hiroshima, but it's not really that simple. Hiroshima is the base of operations of the Yomai Alliance. They are the third strongest clan after the Omi and the Tojo. They have stayed neutral throughout the conflicts over the years and don't take kindly to outsiders. Takeru Kurusu was the founder of the Yomai Alliance, and instead of expanding his operations like the other Yakuza, he maintained that they should build up and defend the land they already had. Kurusu hasn't been seen since the 70s, but Date thinks that Koshimitsu, one of his captains, is operating things now. In short, Kiryu would be going to Hiroshima totally alone, and if he makes the wrong moves, he could spark a war between the Tojo and the Yomai. Kiryu is still persistent and wants to go because he's a civilian and has been for a while. He only requires one thing, for Date to protect Haruka while he's gone. When Kiryu arrives in Onomichi with Haruto in tow, we're introduced to our new location for this entry. Onomichi is a lot smaller than Kamurocho, but that doesn't mean there's nothing to do here. The city has more of that small, rural town feel than the others we've seen, and sort of resembles Okinawa. That's the closest we've seen to something like this in a Yakuza game, but they're still pretty different. Onomichi has more its roots in shipbuilding and spiritual aspects than anything like Kamurocho or Okinawa. Kiryu heads into a local bar, Snack Kiyomi, and meets the woman who owns the place, Kiyomi. This is the woman that we saw in the prologue. We also see Nagumo, the man that we fought in the prologue. He thinks that Kiryu is trying to get with Kiyomi, so of course he wants to fight us. This isn't the same fight that we had in the prologue though, even though that's a little confusing. It's another pretty long fight. Wearing down Nagumo's health is a bit of a chore. It was at this point that I realized weapons on the street would be an integral part of this game's combat system moving forward. They do a bit more damage than just our fists, and it's a way faster way of taking down enemies. Nagumo swears to defeat Kiryu as he's a captain of the Hirose family. When Kiryu gets back to the bar, he asks Kiyomi if she's ever seen Haruka, handing her a picture of the girl. Kiyomi doesn't know the girl and hasn't seen her. She knows Kiryu doesn't have a place to stay, and it just so happens that all the places in town are closed right now. She calls a friend named Ino who will let Kiryu stay in one of his apartments for the night. We head to our new temporary home, and Ino explains that Kiyomi, Nagumo, and he all went to the same school together. They're in a bit of a love triangle, and Nagumo and Ino have always competed for Kiyomi's attention. Kiyomi eventually moved to Tokyo after getting sick of their constant pestering. They began again when she moved back, but since Nagumo has joined the Yakuza, he's become a lot more aggressive. We arrive at the Navy Apartments, our temporary home. Because of Onomichi's roots in shipbuilding, a small gang used to operate out of these apartments. They called themselves the Navy and were con artists that preyed on visitors. Onomichi has been neglected, though, as of late, and the shipbuilding is almost entirely gone. Kiryu heads inside, but Haruto isn't ready for bed. We have to ask people around the city and find someone who knows where we can get powdered milk. We're introduced to an interesting new mechanic that'll be used a couple times in this entry. While we're strolling the streets, Haruto will get upset and we have to calm him down. In Kiryu's POV, we have to read Haruto's movements and try to discern if he wants swung, lifted, upsy-daisied, or his head rubbed. If we correctly guess what he wants, the little mood meter will increase, and when Haruto is satisfied, we can continue strolling around the town. It's an odd little mechanic that's gotten some flack, but I think it fits. Yakuza has always been known for having odd little mini-games, and this game is that. It also fits the story that the team wanted to tell, and that's Kiryu being out of his element. Kiryu has taken care of children, but as far as we can tell, he hasn't had to take care of an actual baby. As we know by now, Kiryu is used to punching his problems, not upsy-daisying them. Kiryu eventually gets pointed to a barber shop. The owner just had a child, so he might have some food for us. We're interrupted by a drunk man peeing outside, and Kiryu is fed up at this point. He defeats the drunk man after handing Haruto off to the woman that answered the door. The woman gives us some milk, but back at the apartments, Haruto won't eat. Thankfully, Kiyomi arrives and we find out that Haruto was just tired. She puts him down for bed and Kiryu asks her if she had any children. She says she used to just babysit for a friend, that's it, and leaves. Kiryu runs into Nagumo when looking for leads the next morning. He's got two of his Yakuza goons with him this time though, Yuta and Matsunaga. His boys don't care about his grudge against Kiryu and try to get him to drop it, but he won't. Kiryu leaves when he's taking out his rage on his men. Kiryu's back at the bar and Kiyomi wants Kiryu to sub in for Ino's baseball team since someone called in sick. Kiryu thinks he might be able to get information on Haruka there, so he obliges. Nagumo happens to be on the other team, of course, and so are his boys. Nagumo tries to hit Kiryu with a ball and Kiryu tosses his bat at the man. We have to battle the three men, and having no healing items here, fighting against three guys was a bit of a pain. They have no qualms teaming up on us, but eventually we defeat them. Kiyomi asked around about Haruka, but no one has seen or heard of her. Kiryu thinks that maybe she was only in town briefly, and that he's just chasing a dead end. Kiyomi invites Kiryu back to the bar for some food, and we see the battle that took place in the prologue. Someone we can't see knocks Nagumo out as Kiryu walks away. When Kiryu arrives back at the bar, Koji Masuzo comes in, dragging a beaten Nagumo. He's the patriarch of the Masuzo family, who Nagumo's family works for. He's here to collect protection money from Kiyomi. The man drags Nagumo outside to beat him for not collecting the money in the first place. Kiryu heads out to make sure Nagumo doesn't get killed. We find them on the lookout at the top of Onomichi, and Nagumo is being beaten heavily. Kiryu steps in to help even though Nagumo hates him. Masuzo wasn't a terrible fight. He uses an odd style and is pretty strong, but with some heat actions and quick punches, he goes down easy. Kiryu says that he saved Nagumo because he put his life on the line to protect Kiyomi. Nagumo at this point respects Kiryu greatly, especially after he's defeated him multiple times and saved his life. He can't match Kiryu's strength, but he does request that Kiryu become his Aniki. Kiryu has had bad things happen with that in the past, but Nagumo is persistent, so he gives in. We head back to the Hirose family offices with Nagumo. Kiryu is formally introduced to Yuta and the leader of the family, Toru Hirose. He was a legend back in the day, on the front lines when the Omi tried to invade. Tagashira comes back as Kiryu is getting to know Hirose with a bloody nose. He says that there's some trouble at the family bar, Moreno. Matsunaga was being disrespected after they got beat up by Kiryu and got into a fight. Yuta and Tagashira don't want to leave their brother like that, but Nagumo wants him to clean up his own mess. Kiryu decides to go help out, and good thing because the Hirose men were getting beat down. As Kiryu tries to get them to calm down, we have to battle them. We defeat them, and Nagumo tells Matsunaga that he has to respect Kiryu now. Matsunaga isn't keen on sweeping everything under the rug so quickly, though. Kiryu decides to leave while the two are fighting and head back to the bar. Kiryu explains everything that happened to Kiyomi, and she's happy that the two's beef has ended. The next day, Kiryu asks the Yakuza if they know Haruka. None of them have seen her and are surprised that she's so young. The underlings make some excuses and leave the place while Kiryu talks to Hirose. He thanks Kiryu for saving Nagumo, but tells him that the Masuzo family are on his tail now. Kiyomi confirms this when Kiryu heads outside, as they were just at the bar asking about him. Kiryu gives Kiyomi Haruto, who she takes to a shrine on the hill so he can be protected. At the shrine, Kiyomi warns Kiryu that things will change with the Masuzo after him. He understands and confides that he knows the Hirose men know something about Haruka. He could see it all over their faces, but he's grown to like them, so he wants them to come to him about it. Kiryu goes to Moreno to apologize to Matsunaga. Matsunaga is currently building a model ship of Yamato, a boat that was built in Hiroshima during World War II. Matsunaga makes it clear that the two aren't friends. Yuta busts in and says the men Kiryu roughed up the other night were shipbuilders and complained to the Yomai. Captain Koshimitsu is at the Hirose HQ right now with Masuzo to settle things. Matsunaga doesn't want Kiryu to help and throws off the boy's recommendation to toss Kiryu to the wolves. Matsunaga says that the Hirose family has to face this. Apparently, the men were part of Iwami shipbuilding and are one of the most influential shipbuilding businesses in possibly the world. Kiryu wants to head over and help, but Yuta and Takashira try to stop him. They don't, of course, and Kiryu makes his way to the Hirose HQ. Masuzo is there and wants a rematch. We have to take him and his respawning men on. It's a bit of a headache of a battle because Masuzo is annoying, but when he has 5 men around him, it's even worse. After defeating him, Koshimitsu shows up and punches Masuzo for looking dumb. He introduces himself to Kiryu, and he knows exactly who Kiryu is already. The two men leave, and Kiryu checks in on Matsunaga, who's been beaten up. The boys haven't taken things too hard, though, because they can all have a laugh afterwards. Kiryu comes clean and tells them all that he's the Dragon of Dojima, but most of them don't seem too surprised. Kiryu thinks they're hiding something, but doesn't press the issue and heads out. Kiyomi is at his apartment and she seems off, but leaves before giving any info. Kiryu puts Haruto down for the night and has a cigarette. Nagumo arrives shortly after and confesses that they all knew Haruka. He apologizes for not saying something sooner, but Haruka didn't want them to. Haruka came to Onomichi 3 years ago. She didn't talk a lot about her past, but everyone in town knew her. They also knew she was an idol, but wanted to give her a quiet life in peace. Nagumo doesn't know who Haruto's father is, though, and says Haruka never actually dated anyone. She must have gotten pregnant shortly before she left or after. Nagumo does say that there's one person who would know the answer, and that's Kiyomi, who hired Haruka to work as a waitress. Kiryu calms Haruto at the offices, and he thinks that even though he serves well, he would probably rather be with his mother. Kiyomi wasn't at the bar, but left Kiryu a note saying that she wanted to meet him at the ropeway later to talk one-on-one. Kiryu leaves Haruto with the Yakuza to go talk to Kiyomi. Kiyomi first met Haruka after she arrived in Onomichi. Haruka was a big part of the town and was pretty happy until she came to Kiyomi's bar crying one day. She left town the day after. The two think that must have been the day Haruka found out she was pregnant. Kiyomi has an idea who the father might be, but before she can give the name, Somaya shows up with his men. Somaya is there to swear an oath to Koshimitsu, the second in charge of the Yomai. Kiryu takes this all as odd, especially since Somaya isn't the chairman, Tsugai is, but Tsugai is considering Somaya as next in line for the chair. Somaya and Kiyomi seem to have some sort of past, they dated before, but Kiryu still doesn't pry. It really seems like Kiryu is fed up with Yakuza business in this entry. Before, he used to concern himself with everything and get in the middle to do anything to save the Tojo. Now he just seems like he wants to find out what happened to Haruka. Everything else is secondary to him. Kiryu returns to the Hirose family and fills them in. Ino arrives and says that Kiyomi was just kidnapped by Somaya. Nagumo and Matsunaga are ready to go save her, but Kiryu offers to go instead. If the Hirose family gets involved with a guest of the Yomai, they could be killed and the clan would be dissolved. Hirose barges in and tells them he has a solution. They can wear ski masks to keep their identities hidden. The group plans their attack using schematics of the hotel to intricately think through their movements. They head to the hotel where Kiyomi is being held, and we have a massive building crawling with enemies that we have to fight through. A lot of the set pieces in Yakuza 6 are really good, especially with the upgraded engine. The game looks so much better, the environments are incredibly realistic, and it really feels like we're in a place, not necessarily a video game area. Eventually we make our way up the building and Nagumo takes his mask off in the sauna. Masuzo sees his face and their cover is blown. Somaya was hiding the whole time and doesn't want to fight Kiryu because he knows he won't win. He blinds Kiryu with steam and runs off. Kiryu heads after him, making his way through tons of goons. Kiryu finds Somaya, who is now ready for a battle because he's backed into a corner. Tattoos are a mainstay in the Yakuza, and they're a way to show that you're a truly dedicated member. You can't just up and leave if you're basically branded, but Somaya doesn't have one. He thinks it's a relic of the past, and money is what rules now. This shows that he doesn't respect the Yakuza, at least not like Kiryu or others do. We battle the man in his underwear, and he's a pretty tough fight at this point, especially for me because I didn't have any healing items again. Yakuza 6 makes it a little more difficult to get healing items than previous entries. One reason for this is that you're not awash with cash like in previous games. You're pretty broke most of the time unless you run off and do side content. There's also the fact that Kamurocho doesn't have a drugstore anymore, so you can't get Stamina Royale easily. You can get some healing drinks at the convenience store, but they aren't the best. Onomichi has a drugstore, but it's only open during the day. As Kiryu wins his battle, Koshimitsu steps out of the other room, glad that he's arrived. Kiyomi is having dinner with the two men, Koshimitsu and Iwami, the president of Iwami Shipbuilding. Kiyomi apparently wasn't forced there, they were just offering a dinner invitation to their new partner's wife. Koshimitsu ejects the Hirose family for their disturbance. They're no longer part of the Yomai, but Iwami decides that he should drop the matter. Iwami eventually reveals himself as Takeru Kurusu, the chairman of the Yomai Alliance. Iwami Shipbuilding is actually a front for the Yomai, run by Kurusu's son. Kurusu heads off to a boat to talk to Kiryu. Kurusu wants Kiryu to witness the oath-swearing between Somaya and Koshimitsu. This alliance between the Tojo and the Yomai would be huge. The Yomai have always been neutral, and them getting involved could change the tide for the Tojo. Kiryu doesn't want to step in, though, and undermine Daigo's authority. Kurusu says that they won't be able to go through with the alliance if Kiryu doesn't witness it, and this could mean that they could go to the Omi, which would be very bad for the Tojo. Kiryu doesn't care anymore, though. The Tojo aren't his problem. He heads back to the Hirose offices. Kiyomi reveals that she thinks Haruto's father is Tatsukawa, a friend of Yuta's who is a former member of the Hirose. She overheard him talking on the phone with someone after Haruka left and telling them to get an abortion. Takashira keeps in contact with Tatsukawa, and apparently he moved back to Tokyo and is working as a host. Before Kiryu leaves for Kamurocho, Yuta gives him a picture of the man he's looking for. Somaya arrives to talk to Kiyomi. He asks how their daughter is, dropping a big reveal on us, that the two have a child. She says he can come to see her daughter in Tokyo sometime. Kiryu tells the group about Haruka's condition, and Yuta and Nagumo decide to go to Kamurocho with him. The group arrives and they head to Cafe Alps to plan things out. Kiryu decides that their best option is to head to Stardust and ask around about Tatsukawa. On their way, Yuta gets the runs and has to stop at a convenience store. Nagumo is looking at a magazine and sees that Daigo's appeal has been rejected, so he's definitely going to prison. Kiryu says he can't do anything to help. Yuta is still looking for a bathroom and runs to Stardust, but he gets thrown out. No male customers. Kazuki and Yuya don't work there anymore, so they can't get in. Just then, we see Yuya in a business suit. They head to a restaurant nearby to talk. Tatsukawa started working at Stardust right before Yuya left. Apparently, the club scene went downhill when the war between the Triad and the Tojo started. Yuya and Kazuki couldn't keep the place running and had to sell it to a group of Koreans, who we assume is the Jingwon Mafia. Yuya is working a desk job now, and Kazuki is trying to get money to buy the club back. A man walks in, interrupting their conversation. He's the new owner of Stardust, Jungi Han. He apologizes for his bouncer's actions earlier and invites them all to the club. He knows who Kiryu is and wants to talk to him specifically. The group are attacked on their way, though, by the Jingwan Mafia. Kiryu gets to Stardust, and Han confirms that he's a member of the Jingwan. He doesn't care about Kiryu's past with them, though. Stardust looks kind of empty, but apparently Han is running a side business in the back that is much more popular. In the secret area, the female clients can do anything they want to the hosts. Han reveals that he knows where Tatsukawa is, but Kiryu has to fight him for it. Kiryu denies his proposition. He doesn't want to be a dancing monkey on Han's stage. Yuta offers to fight him, but this doesn't go too well, as Han is too powerful of an opponent for Yuta. Kiryu finally steps in. Han is a slight challenge. He's fast and strong, but we can make quick work of him by dodging and attacking when he opens up. Apparently Tatsukawa knew Chinese and was hanging out around Little Asia after quitting Stardust. Han believes that he was using the job as a cover for something else. Tatsukawa was getting in as an informant with the Triad, and Han tells Kiryu that he lives in a building off of Senryo Ave. Kiryu refuses to tell Han why he wants to talk to the man, and asks Han about the Jingwan's involvement in the war between the Tojo and the Triad. Apparently the Jingwan isn't involved at all, and Kiryu takes his leave. Kiryu is ready for battle. He promises to not hold back if he finds out Tatsukawa hurt Haruka. They head to the building, and when they get inside, they find the man dead, a woman with him. Date and Hanjo show up, and Hanjo is suspicious that Kiryu was involved with the death. He has a motive, after all. Date promises to talk to Kiryu at New Sedona. Kiryu thinks that Haruka might have been a casualty of Tatsukawa's involvement in the Triad business. Date tells Kiryu that Haruka has been moved to a police hospital for her safety. Kiryu wants to find Akiyama because Akiyama might be able to get him into a meeting with Ed, the man that they fought in the sewers. If he can figure out why the Sayo Triad has Tatsukawa killed, he might be closer to solving this whole thing. Date doesn't approve, but just asks that Kiryu tell him everything he learns. Kiryu heads to the sewers to look for Akiyama, and there's some Chinese goons waiting for him. We beat them down and talk to the homeless man from before. He says Akiyama hasn't been down here since Kiryu was with him. He tells Kiryu he can contact him, but it'll take some time. When Akiyama finally calls Kiryu, we find out that Ed is an officer of the Triad that he's involved with. Akiyama wants to meet in the APA hotel. When Kiryu arrives, some people are following him. We defeat them, but Kiryu finds out that they're Tojo. Akiyama arrives, disguised as a window washer, with Murota in tow. Apparently Sugai and the Tojo itself have been worried about Kiryu being back in town. There's a rumor going around that Daigo's jail time was set up by Sugai as a power play, and Sugai and Somaya are also at each other's throats. Akiyama is grateful that Kiryu is here, and even though he doesn't want to be, he hopes Kiryu will fix all of this. The group ski mask up again as they plan to sneakily break into Little Asia and talk with Ed. This whole part is a great section of cool set pieces. We're sneaking around boxes, chefs, guards. Then we're on roofs, sneaking in through balconies. The whole thing is just awesome. Eventually, Kiryu gets separated and meets Ed. Ed admits to killing Tatsukawa and doesn't want to tell Kiryu why. He asks if he knows what Haihazi means. Haihazi are children born outside of China's one-child policy. They usually end up on the streets or in poverty, but the Triad will smuggle them into Japan. Tatsukawa was a Haihazi and joined the Yomai out of thanks. He apparently betrayed the Triad, but Ed won't tell Kiryu how before he attacks him, and we're thrown into battle. This one was pretty tough. We fight Ed on the balcony and then downstairs, as we're rejoined with the group and he brings a ton of goons in. One thing that Yakuza 6 took out was quick-time events doing real damage to the enemy boss. Usually in a Yakuza boss fight, you'll reach a certain point where you have a scripted quick-time event. In most entries, completing these quick-time button presses will do some damage to the boss, and failing it will do damage to Kiryu. This is mostly removed from Yakuza 6 outside of like 2 fights. I didn't like this at all, and it just seems odd that we still receive damage from these events, but enemies don't. We take Ed down, and before the group gets any answers, Masuzo arrives. He reveals that he was a part of the Triad the entire time, and a Haihazi. Masuzo doesn't want to shoot Kiryu without the boss's word, and the man walks in, Big Lo. He asks Masuzo something in Chinese that we don't understand. Big Lo wants to talk to Kiryu when he cools off a little bit and tells him to meet him in Shangri-La the next day. At New Sedona, the group are discussing what they should do. Kiryu is going to head to New Sedona, but before he leaves, Yuta tells him what Lo said to Masuzo. Yuta learned Chinese from Tatsukawa so he could translate it. Apparently, Lo told him that Kiryu doesn't know the significance of Onimichi or the secret hidden there, something that can't ever be revealed. Somaya is meeting with some higher-up Yakuza, and they suggest that he should push Kiryu out since he's no longer a Yakuza. Somaya smashes a bottle over the man's head in protest. At New Sedona, Kiryu fills Date in on the new information. Somaya shows up and heard about Kiryu's meeting with Lo and wants to go with him so he can try to broker a truce to end the war. Kiryu asks him first if burning Little Asia was a ploy to get Daigo thrown in jail. He says that's ridiculous, and Kiryu agrees to take him. Somaya won't reveal who killed Jimmy Lo, Big Lo's son, the event that started this whole thing, but he knows the culprit. After he leaves, Date seems to think that Somaya is trying to take out Lo, killing him and ending the war. Kiryu promises to intervene if it comes to that. Kiryu and Somaya head to Shangri-La, which is still a dilapidated ruin after it was destroyed in the first game. Apparently it's home to some nefarious characters now. We have to battle our way through the ruins, and there's some freak named Hangman that throws rocks at us as we cross beams. We eventually have to defeat him and make our way through. Lo is disappointed that Kiryu didn't come alone. Somaya basically admits that he lied earlier and the fire was the Tojo clan's doing. He wants to bring Lo in, but Kiryu doesn't want to help him. The two end up butting heads and we go to battle. Somaya is a little bit of a pain, and we don't have many weapons here to make it any easier. Eventually we take him down, and Somaya is never going to be as strong as Kiryu, let alone stronger. Lo wants Kiryu to join him and get his vengeance. Apparently it wasn't the Tojo that killed his son, but Iwami. He brought the Sayo Triad in to change the Tojo clan's leaders and tried to kill Lo when he was done with him. Lo doesn't want to kill Somaya because he's just a pawn, put there by Iwami to better control them. He sends him off with a message that he'll stop at nothing to avenge his son's death. Lo is impressed with Kiryu and will tell him of Tatsukawa's betrayal if he joins the Triad. Of course, Kiryu won't, but he reveals something even bigger. Tatsukawa is not Haruto's father. Even bigger than that, Haruto is the key to this dispute, and everyone is realizing how important he is. Kiryu gets a call from Yuta saying that Patriarch Hirose has gone missing, and he's taken Haruto with him. Back at New Sedona, everyone has been looking for Hirose, but no one can find him. The group heads back to Onomichi as Matsunaga and Tagashira are probably in trouble now. If Haruto is that important, then everyone will be looking for him. It's about time we talk about the music of Yakuza 6. This entry is really special and stands out from the rest in my opinion. Brother Brother feels like a classic anime track, rocking guitars and a great beat to back it up. Through is an epic track that rises and falls, but always feels like it's going full speed. It reminds me of something from Final Fantasy in its grandiosity. Body and Soul goes incredibly hard. It feels like triumph and success. It feels like the sunrise just beyond the horizon. Like you're almost there, but you just can't quite reach it. The Way of Life is probably my favorite track. It's huge, foreboding, destructive, events to come. It feels like the power of the gods are about to rain down on you as you stare up at the sky, something stronger that you can't face. It's terrifying. The whole OST is terrific and really presents some new ideas, fitting with the style and theme of the game overall. The group is accosted by Yomai as soon as they get back in town. Once they arrive at Morena, they find Kiyomi, Matsunaga, and Takashira. Hirose left one morning when Kiyomi stepped outside to get him cigarettes. He took the child with him, paid his tab, and left his cell phone. The group thinks that he may have taken the child to someplace safe, but there's no way to know for sure. Kiyomi apologizes for basically losing Haruto, but Kiryu doesn't blame her. Kiyomi reveals a bit more about her relationship with Somaya. After high school, she moved to Tokyo. She was working at a hostess club and got scammed into a bunch of debt. Somaya helped her out and the two got married and had a child. Somaya was climbing the ranks of the Yakuza, and one night Kiyomi finally decided to leave. She saw Somaya playing with their child when she was cleaning blood out of his suit. Somaya didn't let her leave and hit Kiyomi for trying to go and take their daughter. She eventually had to leave the kid behind and feels like a bad mother for it. Nagumo vows to get her daughter back for her. Kiryu searches a bunch of places that Hirose would be known to visit but can't find anything. He finds a box of matches in his room from a place called Snack Hourglass, but as he leaves, he's jumped by Yomi men. Koshimitsu ordered them to look for Hirose. At Snack Hourglass, the owner says that she was supposed to tell Kiryu that he would be waiting at the shrine on the hill. On his way, Kiryu is intercepted by Koshimitsu. He's looking for Hirose as well, and Kiryu wants to know why Haruto is so important, but the man won't tell him. We have to fight him in the street. He's got a knife, so he has a big advantage on him. We overcome the odds and defeat him. Nagumo knocks the man out with a bottle, saying that the owner of the bar sent them. Kiryu wants him to wake up so they can get some information, but Hirose arrives with Haruto and says he'll tell them everything. They all talk at the shrine. Hirose apologizes for running off with the child. Hirose says he took the child to get him away from Koshimitsu. Hirose had been keeping tabs on Haruka since the baby was born and knew that people would be after him. He's so important because of his father, who is revealed to be Yuta. We jump back to 2 years before. Haruka is walking home and sees Yuta beating someone down. He was smashing a paparazzi member who was trying to get pictures of her. He wanted her to be able to live a normal life, and he says that he'll see her around. Back in present day, Kiryu gives Yuta a terrible look, incredibly disappointed in him. Yuta didn't tell anyone because they were also certain it was Tatsukawa, and he and Haruka only did it once. Nagumo hits him, and Kiryu tells him to calm down. Masuzo arrives to explain all of it. Hirose has promised him something in exchange for the truth. Kurusu will ensure Masuzo's safety once it's all out there. Yuta has had eyes on him since he was a child. He's actually the son of Big Lo and the heir to the Sayo Triad. Yuta is the younger brother of Jimmy, the one murdered months ago. Because the Sayo is run on a bloodline, only family members being able to take positions of power, they will sometimes exile the younger son to ensure a war of succession doesn't begin. Yuta was exiled as a child, but he doesn't believe it. Masuzo and Tatsukawa have been watching over him his whole life. Tatsukawa was trying to get Haruka to have an abortion so that there wasn't a half-Japanese heir running around. Hirose eventually helped Haruka escape. Haruka went to Hirose after she found out about Yuta's lineage. Hirose helped her get out of town. It wasn't too big of a deal at first until Jimmy Lo was killed and Yuta became first in line to take over the Triad. Tatsukawa ended up finding Haruka and Lo ordered them to kill the child. Tatsukawa was going to do it but eventually betrayed the Triad. He was going to give the child to Iwami, but something was off and Haruka was hit by his car. Tatsukawa was killed by Ed in a brutal fashion. Masked men arrive to attack the group, and the guys play football with Haruto in probably one of the funniest scenes in the entire series. Yuta gets the baby out with men following him, and Han shows up, ready to fight Kiryu again. He's just as tough as before, but now we have more room and more weapons around us to use against him. Some Jingwan men interrupt them and tell Han that they have the child. Kiryu follows them and finds Yuta without Haruto. He passed him off to Nagumo. When they arrive back at the offices, Yuta wants to apologize to Kiryu for what happened with him and Haruka, but Kiryu isn't too happy about hearing any of this. Nagumo says the Jingwan grabbed Haruto. They're getting a boat ready to go after him, but Yuta isn't moving. Nagumo threatens him, but Kiryu stops him and punches the man into the street. Kiryu gives Yuta a pep talk, but not a soft one. He tells him that he's going after Haruto and he can come along, but if he doesn't, Kiryu will never speak to him again. Kiryu and Nagumo head to the docks, and just as they're about to leave, Yuta arrives, begging to let him save his son. They all head off to find Haruto. They're heading for a cargo island in the water. Takashita says that Masuzo ran off during the fight and isn't their problem. Apparently the Sayo triad and the Yomai are pretty tight. The Yomai was taking in all of Sayo's Haihazi that they smuggled in. Kiryu is trying to figure out what the secret of Onomichi is, though, which Nagumo theorizes has to do with the Fixer, a man of legend in the Japanese government. He's been a part of every large scandal that's occurred for a long time. Kiryu and everyone but Haruto and Ino head onto the island. While fighting off some men, Han calls Kiryu. He says if he sends Yuta into Kamurocho to kill Lo, then he'll spare Haruto. Kiryu denies his offer and says he's coming to get the child right now. We have to fight through a ton of enemies on the island, jumping over gaps and tossing exploding barrels onto goons. This whole section is kind of awesome and makes a really sick action movie set piece. Kiryu finds Han, who confirms that Iwami is funding the Jingwan Mafia. His men were the ones that murdered Jimmy Lo, and Iwami paid them to drudge up the war between the Triad and the Tojo. Han was there when Tatsukawa tried to get Haruto, and even reveals that Haruka's accident was, well, an actual accident. Tatsukawa wasn't trying to kill her. Haruka ran away when he tried to take the child, and when he tried to catch up to her, he lost control of the wheel. We fight Han once again. One thing I haven't mentioned about combat yet is extreme heat mode. This is something we can activate when our heat bar has filled a little bit. We can go into an ultra mode and deliver a ton of punches. I had to use this a lot to make battles go faster, but it's kind of a give and take. It's not like Kiryu's super mode in Yakuza 5. We can still take damage in this. So most of the time all of our punches are getting through, but our health bar is being drained at the same time, and the trade-off isn't really worth it. Kiryu doesn't want to kill Han in front of Haruto and spares him. Kiryu asks Han if he knows the secret of Onomichi, and he tells Kiryu to ask Kurusu. Han is then shot in the head by someone in the shadows. Kiryu gets out of the way and we see that Masuzo was also killed. Kiryu returns to the Hirose family offices. Kiryu fills them in on what's happened to Han. Kiryu thinks it might have been Kurusu that had Han shot, and it probably has something to do with Onomichi. Hirose used to be drinking buddies with Kurusu, and they're starting to think the secret of Onomichi is just a fairy tale. Kiryu is going to take Haruto back to his apartment for the night and invites Yuta to join him and spend some time with his son. Yuta feels good having a son. As a child, he was always angry and never had anyone to turn to other than Tatsukawa. Now he's realizing most of the people around him have been watching him, and even joining the Hirose family was planned out. He decides that in the morning he'll head to Kamurocho to try and negotiate with Lo and get Haruto safe. The two head back to the Hirose offices in the morning to tell the group the plan. Kiryu tells Nagumo to stay back to protect Hirose. Yuta and Kiryu head to Kamurocho and take Haruto to New Serena. Iwami has arrived in town with a bunch of Yomai men. He's probably in town to negotiate with Tsugai and revive their talks. They find Yuta missing when he goes to make a call, realizing he must have gone to Little Asia alone. Nagumo calls at that moment, saying Yuta left a will at the offices. We see Yuta arriving at the Sao headquarters. Yuta soaks the walls in gasoline and begins to burn the place down. We have to fight through the burning building and eventually take on Ed one last time. Yuta is about to kill Lo and end his own life. He thinks that this will fix things, but it'll actually just restart the cycle. Haruto will be without a father. This really isn't the answer. Kiryu has to stop him, and we begin to do battle. Yuta is a pretty cool fight, mostly because it takes place in a burning down building. He's not too difficult though, and when he's defeated, Kiryu grabs the two of them and gets them to safety. Kiryu scalds Lo outside for what he's done to his son. Lo agrees to back off of Haruka and Haruto, ensuring their safety. Lo reveals that Yuta is still a pawn. Even in trying to kill Lo, He's been manipulated by someone trying to hide the secret of Onomichi, a true assassin, named Patriarch Hirose. Hirose showed up and tried to convince Lo to leave the country and his war behind. Lo still wanted revenge for his son's murder, though. He couldn't leave. Hirose had planned to give Lo Yuta so he could take over the Triad. If he didn't, he'd tell Yuta everything. Lo couldn't do anything because Hirose on his own could take them all down. Lo originally stopped this quest to kill Haruto, but Tatsukawa had ended up hitting Haruka with a car. Hirose had to change the plans and killed Han and Masuzo to keep the secret of Onomichi safe, which is his #1 priority. If they want to bring Hirose out, they're going to have to reveal the secret. We see Kurusu talking to Hirose. They've been trying to keep the secret safe for 70 years now, and they've gone through a lot. Kiryu takes Yuta and Lo to New Serena. Kiryu wants to ask Lo some things before he lets him go. The secret of Onomichi is something that Lo doesn't even know. It's Kurusu's one weakness and is probably a military project. Lo was given a code to the secret on his father's deathbed. Kurusu has used the secret to set himself up as chairman of the Yomai and president of Iwami Shipbuilding, as well as the Fixer. Lo had to help him set up the trafficking organization for the Heihachi. Lo's son wanted to blackmail Kurusu and use him to overthrow the Tojo. Lo didn't want to do that as it would risk everything they had going on in Onomichi. Jimmy went ahead anyways and moved into Kamurocho. Eventually, Iwami found out that they didn't know the full secret of Onomichi. Iwami's plan is to use Sugai and Somaya as pawns, starting a fake war to get Daigo out. Yuta doesn't believe that Hirose is an assassin, and Lo wants to talk to Kiryu privately on the roof. Before he goes, Date reveals that Haruka reacted to Haruto's presence when they brought the child in. She isn't awake just yet, but it's moving that way. Lo gives Kiryu the code that he was gifted, entrusting him to find the true secret of Onomichi. He does this because Kiryu is the father of the girl that Yuta loves. He knows he has no right to call Yuta his son at this point, but he trusts Kiryu to keep them all safe. Lo doesn't have much time because since he resigned and dismissed Yuta as his heir, the Triad will get a new leader and Lo will be killed, but he plans to be long gone. He goes to leave and doesn't want to say anything to Yuta because he wouldn't listen to him at this point. Kiryu decides he's going to go to Onomichi to figure out the secret. He also wants to let the Hirose family know what's happened. He feels like he owes them that much at this point. He wants Yuta to go stay with Haruka and Haruto to keep them safe, but Yuta wants to go with Kiryu and end all of this. Yuta won't listen, and eventually Date has to arrest him to make sure he doesn't go. Kiryu arrives back in Onomichi and is met with tons of resistance from the Yomai, telling him to get out of the city and never return. He doesn't listen, of course, and beats them to a pulp. Back at the Hirose family offices, he tells the boys what's going on with Hirose, but none of them will accept the information. Hirose took them all in when their fathers died as part of the Yomai. Accepting this information would be spitting on everything Hirose did for them. Nagumo rejects Kiryu as his Anaki at this point. He doesn't care if what Hirose is doing is bad, they'll still just follow orders. Nagumo takes Kiryu outside and we have to fight him. Luckily, he hasn't really changed too much. The Yomai arrive and we have to fight them as well, Nagumo not willing to back down from a fight. Nagumo still doesn't believe that Hirose is involved in this and wants to work to find the secret so they can clear his name. The code is revealed to be a set of numbers and letters. They think that the code may be some sort of cipher, tied in with information that has to do with Onomichi's history. We have to solve the mystery at this point, which requires going around town and finding multiple poem stones in the village. The interesting thing about this section is that these have been around the entire time, serving seemingly no function until now. They've been in plain view, but you never expect them to come into play in this large of a way. I had just assumed that they would be part of some sort of sub-story. They eventually use the words from the poem stones to form the phrase, "Naval Soldier Yamano Dodai's grave." The group heads to the cemetery and finds the man's grave. Inside is a small container which houses a blueprint to the Iwami shipyard. The group grabs Ino's boat and heads to the old shipyard, which has been abandoned for quite some time. This place is massive and full of tons of goons. We have to battle our way through and climb atop multiple structures. The whole thing just works so well and cements the action-style raids of this entry. At the end of their path, the group finds a strange door, and Hirose attacks. Takashita opens the door and heads inside. Hirose moves to stop him, but Kiryu doesn't let him. The two finally have to do battle. I love the fight against Hirose. The man isn't incredibly physically strong. He's not huge or really quick, and frankly, he's kind of old. So he fights slow, and he uses a knife to get an even edge. At a certain point in the battle, he obscures the area with steam and tries to attack from the shadows. It fits the character so well and just works as a great boss fight. After Kiryu defeats Hirose, Takashita has found and pulled a lever inside the door. At this moment, the secret of Onomichi is revealed. A massive battleship begins to rise out of the water. Matsunaga identifies it as the Yamato, but Kurusu arrives and corrects him. It's the Yamato Mark II, a highly upgraded version. The Mark II was never supposed to be finished, as the war was over and Iwami shipbuilding was set to lose tons of money. Minoru Dadoji came forward and offered to fund the rest of the project with embezzled war money. When American soldiers began demilitarization efforts, they hid the ship so as not to turn it over to them. Dadoji began working his way up in politics, and Kurusu began his own ventures. The secret ended up becoming a liability, one that couldn't be easily gotten rid of. Dadoji needed the ship to remain a secret, otherwise his career would be over. So Kurusu ordered Hirose to kill everyone involved. Hirose explains his side of the story at this point. Kurusu was the leader of a gang at 14, a group of survivors of the nuclear strike. His gang broke into Iwami shipbuilding, and when he disarmed a guard, Kurusu respected his determination and brought him into the Yomai. Hirose grew fond of Kurusu and maintained an admiration for the man. He felt like he never truly fit in with the Yakuza, but Kurusu always took him and pampered him. He eventually told him about the secret of Onomichi, and made him prove his loyalty by shooting Hirose's Aniki in front of him. By Kiryu revealing the secret, Kurusu believes all of those deaths have been for nothing. He ordered Hirose to kill them, and he goes to stab Kiryu, but Nagumo jumps in front of him. Hirose hesitates and eventually denies the order to kill Nagumo. Kurusu shoots him for this, and Matsunaga disarms him. Before Kurusu leaves, he tells Hirose that Dadoji wanted the ship destroyed originally, but he kept it hidden, meaning he was the one that wanted the secret kept safe. Kurusu escapes, and with his secret in the open, he doesn't have long left anyways. Hirose apologizes to his subordinates and tells them that he wished one of them would be able to kill him and stop this whole thing. He killed their fathers to keep the secret hidden and dies. Kiryu looks on and has to relate to seeing Kazuma die in his arms all those years ago. Kurusu is at his office and is going to call Dadoji. Iwami, his son, is there and tells him that Dadoji isn't in. It's over for Kurusu now that the secret is out, and Iwami has known about it for a long time. Iwami now has to silence Kurusu. If he isn't killed, then all the politicians that he's done business with will be taken down by association, and it would collapse Japan. Before he ends his life, he wants to know why he never trusted him with the secret. Kurusu tells him that he wanted a better life for his son. That's why he gave him Iwami shipbuilding, a good position that wasn't involved in crime. Iwami is going to take up the power and the money now. He's going to take the Yomai alliance and work with Dadoji. Nothing can stop him. Koshimitsu steps in and shoots Kurusu. Iwami tells Dadoji of his father's suicide and is going to cover up his involvement in the ship. He wants Dadoji to cover up his involvement in Kurusu's death, though. Dadoji promises this with one exception. Iwami has to kill Kiryu before he dies. Yuta is sitting beside Haruka at her bed, and as Haruto takes her hand, she wakes up. The group are mourning Hirose at the office, and they hear a news report about the Mark II. Iwami Shipbuilding is, of course, denying all involvement. Matsunaga and Nagumo are angry that Hirose killed their fathers, but they can't bring themselves to want retribution. They believe that Hirose must have brought them in out of guilt, but eventually grew to love them. Somaya is in Onomichi and wants to talk to Kiryu. Somaya informs Kiryu of what's happened with Iwami and Kurusu. Somaya was sent to kill Kiryu, but doesn't want to, as that would make the Tojo truly pawns of the Yomai. He tells Kiryu to go back to Kamurocho with Haruka and Haruto and lie low until this is all over. But when has Kiryu ever done that? On top of that, Koshimitsu was watching the whole thing in secret. At the Hirose family offices, Some Yomai show up and destroy the HQ. The group fends them off, and Kiryu calls Yuta to tell him to get Haruka and Haruto to a safe place. The boys decide to go with Kiryu to protect Haruka, as that's what Hirose would have wanted. Kiryu heads to the hospital after the group gets into the city. He finally gets to see Haruka awake, and she apologizes for everything she did. Kiryu gets choked up, and eventually Akiyama tells him they might have to keep moving Haruka to get her away from the Tojo. Kiryu has to end this so that she and her new family can have peace. Kiryu calls Somaya and finds out that Tsugai is in the Millennium Tower. Kiryu intends to go there and kill him. Kiryu talks to Haruka, and she assures him that Yuta is a good person. He agrees and tells her that he's proud of the mother that she's become. Back at New Sedona, the group prepare to head out. At the Millennium Tower, the group begins their ascent. We have to make our way up the building, which is a huge, massive ascent to the top. We're assailed at multiple points by a helicopter and tons of goons. Before Kiryu gets to the top, Tsugai calls and informs him that he's not there. As Kiryu heads up, Somaya is there, armed with a katana. Tsugai and Koshimitsu are watching over video. Somaya tipped him off, turning on us in the end. We have to defeat the man, which is a bit of a long and vicious battle. Because he has a sword for most of it, we have to make sure to dodge. Getting out of the way of his attacks and finding time to fit in our own will see us coming out on top. It's revealed that Somaya went against Kiryu because they had Kiyomi captive. If he didn't kill Kiryu, they'd end Kiyomi's life. Tsugai gives Kiryu to the count of 3 to kill Somaya or he'll shoot Kiyomi. Nagumo bursts in and Somaya shoves a knife into his own gut. Somaya tells Kiyomi that he never hit their daughter, and Koshimitsu turns off the camera before we hear a gunshot. Somaya makes Nagumo swear that he'll take care of his and Kiyomi's child, and he agrees before Somaya dies from his wounds. They return to New Sedona and fill everyone in. Their journey to the Millennium Tower made them no progress. Yuta is still suffering from wounds that he got at the Millennium Tower, and Kiryu asks Akiyama to take him. Akiyama asks Kiryu what he would have done if he got his hands on Tsugai, because it's not like the Dragon of Dojima to kill someone. Kiryu says that he always fails protecting friends and family, clearly affected by Kiyomi and Somaya's death. Akiyama still believes in Kiryu, and Kiryu heads up to the roof to talk to Nagumo. He tells Kiryu that Kurusu's funeral will be tomorrow, and Tsugai and Iwami will both be there. No one else will go with them, but the two are ready for revenge. Arriving at the funeral, we punch our way through the Yomai ranks. Koshimitsu uses Kiyomi's death to taunt them, and Kiryu says he doesn't care if he wins here. He's ending Tsugai and Iwami. We have to fight Koshimitsu and his men first, which isn't too bad of a fight. He'll do a ton of damage to us with his blade, but pushing past it and ending him first wins us the battle. Before Kiryu can move on to Iwami and Tsugai, they reveal that they've captured Haruka and Haruto. They paid off Tokyo PD, killed Hanjo, and shot Date. Kiryu can't fight back or they'll kill Haruka. Tsugai beats Kiryu with a pipe, taking out his rage on the man. Iwami begins arguing with him, and they don't notice the other Hirose members saving Haruka and Haruto. This allows Kiryu to finally fight back, and we have our final battle of the story against Iwami. This fight can actually be kind of tough. Iwami is pretty strong, and he blocks a lot of our attacks. His counterattacks are pretty damaging as well. Eventually he goes down, and Kiryu goes in to kill Iwami. Iwami uses his last moment to yell to Tsugai. Tsugai tries to shoot Haruka, but Yuta steps in front of the gun, and in the ultimate step in front of the bullet twist of the series, Kiryu steps in front of even that, and is shot in the stomach multiple times. Takeshita knocks Tsugai out, and Kiryu collapses. He tells Haruka to hold Yuta and Haruto close, and passes out. Tsugai takes his own life, and we see Dadoji die of his illnesses. With Iwami being the only one left, he'll truly pay for his crimes. A month later, we see Nagumo talking to Hiromi, Somaya, and Kiyomi's daughter at the Onomichi bar. He says that she should be proud of her father because he really cared about her in the end. Kiyomi is revealed to be alive. Koshimitsu had his gun loaded with blanks. Haruka is talking to the boys outside. Nagumo, Takeshita, and Matsunaga are going to work with Koshimitsu and build the Yomai back up. Yuta and Haruka are going back to Okinawa to raise Haruto. They wish Kiryu was here to see everything, but they can't look back now. Daigo is getting out of jail and is filled in by Majima and Saejima. The Yomai isn't a threat anymore, and most of the Tojo are wanting revenge for Kiryu's death. Daigo received a letter from Kiryu before he went to his final battle. Kiryu didn't want him to get revenge for his death, and he apologized for not being there during Daigo's time in leadership. Daigo decides to honor Kiryu's last wishes and sends people out to begin negotiations for an alliance between Kamurocho and Hiroshima. We then see Kiryu at a hospital. Someone from the government arrives and gives him a suitcase full of money. Because of the secrets that Kiryu knows, he has to keep quiet about the Onomichi secret. Kiryu refuses to take the money because he knows it would just get him into trouble later. Kiryu suggests another option. He fakes his death in exchange for Daigo's release, and he'll never be seen again. Date is meant to be a witness to Kiryu's death, but he protests. He won't be able to see his family ever again, but if it keeps them safe, then he'll do it. Date is back at New Serena, and Akiyama is talking to him. He doesn't believe that Kiryu is really dead, but Date holds strong and doesn't tell him the truth. Akiyama hopes that one day, far in the future, Date will be honest with him and tell him what really happened to the Dragon of Dojima. The last scene of the game, and Kiryu's saga, is at Morning Glory Orphanage. Haruka, Yuta, and all of the kids are trying to get Haruto to take his first steps. They're encouraging him, and we see Kiryu watching from afar. Haruto falls, but Haruka makes sure to egg Haruto on, and he finally gets it, walking for the first time. We finally see Kiryu walking off and truly ending his saga, everyone safe and at peace. Yakuza 6 is a wild and epic story that goes all over the place. When it begins, it truly feels like something much smaller scale, but widens and opens up into this huge epic dealing with the fates of everyone involved. It also introduces some fantastic characters like all of the Hirose family. Giving Haruka a child was an incredibly risky and ambitious choice, and is extremely odd that this is where her story ends. Seeing her all the way back in Yakuza 1, a child in a bar, lost and alone, traumatized. It's hard to imagine her now having a kid, but it's all done so well. And the intrigue of the new location and the cast of dynamic and interesting characters that's introduced just makes this game so wonderful. It also spotlights Kiryu's change and transformation, and in the end, he finally gets what he wants, for everyone to be safe. He's always been one for self-sacrifice, and that just fits his character. Having to be away from everyone is just the price he has to pay, and he's okay with that. A true and fitting end to Kiryu's story. Once we beat the game, we unlock Premium Adventure, and are allowed to stroll the streets, getting deep into all of these side activities that this game has to offer. With that, we should start talking properly about Yakuza 6's distractions. Yakuza 6 doesn't have too many super large mini-games at its disposal. This entry trends towards a lot of smaller, little adventures and things to get caught up in, rather than giving us a few huge, massive side stories. The biggest one, though, is by far the Clan Creator. This minigame is introduced through the story and sees us going up against the 6 lunatics. The whole minigame is sort of similar to what I talked about with Yakuza Kiwami 2, but I think this version of it is much better implemented. Instead of being a tower defense game, the enemy is the one defending, and we are summoning our troops. We can gain members of the Kiryu clan and put them into a hierarchy to give them skill and stat upgrades. Where we place them determines how much of these upgrades they'll receive. We can determine which of these troops we'd like to send out on each mission. These are our special troops and can be summoned for a higher amount of currency during the siege. We can also summon generic filler troops for much less and are the bread and butter of our attack squad. Most missions are broken up into small stages where our troops have to bash through enemy lines and defeat a boss. Every few missions we'll face one of the 6 lunatics and have to battle them hand to hand. After defeating them in true Yakuza minigame fashion, they'll want to join up with us. You can train all of your troops with experience to make them stronger as well, upping their stats with Kiryu's own experience. This minigame was pretty fun overall and is a massive upgrade from the Clan Creator in Kiwami 2. This one also moves a lot faster and feels like you're more in control, rather than just waiting for the thing to be over. Kiryu can of course venture to the Cabaret Club as usual. He can visit 4 different girls, and this is probably one of the best cabaret systems that I've seen. We have random conversation cards that we're given that we can choose from. Each of these have different attributes like dapper or party. Choosing cards one after the other that have the same attributes will give us a streak and will increase the heart gauge faster. We can trade cards out whenever we want, but this will end our streak. I like this system a lot more than the previous ones, and it makes much more sense. It's also just a little more flashy and entertaining. Kiryu has a new app installed on his phone in this entry that will let him tap into the troubles of Kamurocho. This, of course, is called Troubler. People will post when they're in trouble, and Kiryu can rush over in real superhero fashion to help them with their issues. This can be anything from protecting people from thugs to getting them toilet paper in the bathroom. Yakuza 6 doesn't have any true trainers. There are not many ways to get stronger outside of just getting experience. Luckily, there's plenty of ways to do that. Rise App is a new gym that's opened in town, and Kiryu can get a membership there. The trainer will put us on a program. We can complete different workouts that give us different types of experience, but this isn't the whole story. After every workout, we have to make sure we eat right. Our trainer will send us a clue as to which type of food we need to eat, and we'll have to seek out a specific dish. If we do it correctly, we'll get better experience rewards from the training. Rise App also offers the best way to farm experience in the form of protein powder. We can buy this in bulk and use it to get tons of XP. A similar face has also joined Rise App, in that of Sodachi. He's gotten pretty buff and wants to get stronger than Kiryu. This means we can battle him around town for small amounts of experience. Saigo will offer the same training in Onomichi. This isn't true training, as we don't learn any new abilities, we just receive some experience points for defeating them and they get stronger each time. Food in general plays a huge part in this entry, the same way that it did in Yakuza Kiwami 2. Eating at a restaurant will give us experience, and combining different dishes will give us boosts to our XP. We can also gain a boost to our experience gain and different modifiers from the shrines of Onomichi. Offering something to the shrine will give us a different kind of boost, the gods truly blessing us in combat. Scattered around both cities are a variety of different safes that can give us tons of stuff. We have to find the keys for them, which are also scattered around the city. Certain ones will have money, ability tomes, or items. If we want to get up to some sightseeing, we can venture around Kamurocho and take pictures. In certain places, though, spirits will appear in our photos. These spirits are that of past characters from the series who have died. If we take enough pictures of them, we can get a photo filter of their spirit form. One of the bigger minigames in Yakuza 6 is baseball. During the story, we help out the local baseball team by filling in for a match. We can continue this story by becoming the team's manager. Completing sub-stories around town will unlock new team members, and we can upgrade our squad. Speaking of batting, the minigame itself has changed slightly to reflect something closer to Yakuza 5's version of it, though not nearly as in-depth. I didn't play the baseball minigame too much, as I don't really care for baseball in general, and it seemed like there was a lot going on here that just wasn't really worth getting super involved in. In Onomichi, there's a small bar that can serve as Kiryu's new watering hole. We can head inside and have drinks with the locals, each with their own problems ready to vent and deal with. Kiryu can help them out with their issues, and this whole minigame is kind of fantastic. It really serves as this weird Cheers dive bar drama simulator. Kiryu can help out an old fisherman in Onomichi whose body won't let him spearfish like he used to. Kiryu can dive out into the waters and catch fish for the man. This minigame is super fun and really feels like one of those old arcade games that they would always have at my local movie theater. It's mostly an on-the-rails shooter where we have to target fish with our spear gun, which can be upgraded by completing different routes. How many fish we catch determines how much money we get and how much our lungs are upgraded. Fish will attack us in the water, decreasing the amount of breath we have. If this goes all the way down, we'll be forced to come up for air. There's a large freakish boss at the end of each course, and these can be pretty tough at lower levels. In Kamurocho, a man who runs a cat cafe has lost all of his cats. We can run around both cities to try and get the cats back by building up a relationship with them. Each cat likes a different type of food, and eventually, once they fully trust us, we can bring the cats back in. We can of course get up to some karaoke in this entry, which I think is personally at its all-time high. The static note bar and the hilarious videos in the background are just fantastic. Kiryu can find a man in Kamurocho who is arguing with his girlfriend because he spends too much time on live chat. Live chat is basically a naughty cam service where you can chat with girls. He of course shows Kiryu this and we can participate. We have to do quick button presses to send the correct messages to the girl. Of course, the bulk of Yakuza's side content are always the sub-stories. Yakuza 6 doesn't have a ton of super amazing sub-stories. Most of the best sub-stories are part of the mini-games that we just talked about, but there are some ones that stand out. Kiryu will eventually come across a young man and a young woman that claim to have switched bodies. We quickly find out that it's actually a ruse, and Kazumi is from the Iwami family, and they don't want the two to be together. The plan was a way to get them to be able to stay together, but Muranaka reveals he was testing the two in the end, and will continue to test them to see if their relationship will stand the test of time. The girl who leapt through time sees us finding a girl who claims to have went back in time 1 year. She can't get back to 2017 though, and doesn't want to have to spend another year with her horrible dad. When Kiryu comes across her father, he seems fine, but the girl says that this was before the event that changed him. He got beat up by some thugs and became a terrible person after that. Kiryu stops this event from happening by beating up the thugs and changes the course of the girl's life. Pocket Circuit Fighter Returns sees us finding an old friend in Onomichi. He's grown very old at this point and is selling tofu in the town. He has a son now and a wife, but his wife isn't the greatest. Fighter won't stand up to her, and his son hasn't even played Pocket Circuit. What? Kiryu tries to show him what his father used to be known for, and Fighter eventually has to make sure his son gets to English class, never getting to spend time with him. Eventually, some thugs are about to beat up on Fighter's son, but Fighter comes back out in his old digs and helps Kiryu protect him. His wife wants them to stop playing around, and Fighter finally realizes that he's been a bad father, not spending time with his son. He cancels his English classes and stands up to his wife. One of the funniest sub-stories sees Kiryu becoming the local mascot of Onomichi, Onomichi-o. We have to appear at a public event and make sure to keep saying Onomichi-o's famous catchphrases, staying in character. Yakuza 6's side content is pretty good, but mostly consists of a larger set of smaller minigames. This isn't too bad, and I think there's some truly interesting stuff here, like the bar chat, the clan creator, and spearfishing. I had a lot of fun with these, but I feel like Yakuza 6 is probably one of the weakest entries in terms of side content, even though the content that is there is pretty polished. Yakuza 6 overall is a fantastic end to an incredibly long story. It gives Kiryu the ending that he needed. He needed to be away from the Yakuza, away from the clan, to hide away somewhere, and this is really the only way that he could have done it. Even if he stuck around Morning Glory, people would have eventually crawled out of the woodwork and brought him back into the fray. Kiryu doesn't need that. He's given way more to the Yakuza than they even deserve. He deserves to have a peaceful and quiet life, and he can do that now that he knows his family is going to be safe. Yakuza 6's combat is slightly lacking and mostly feels awkward and out of place at the beginning, but slightly improves throughout the entry with some upgrades and increases in speed and combat. It's not terrible, it just definitely doesn't compare with some of the best in the series. Overall, Yakuza 6 is still a great game, and it looks fantastic. It has some of the best designs in UI in the entire series. Its story is also wonderfully crafted and really feels incredibly grandiose and heartfelt. Yakuza 6 was given great reviews from most publications. Famitsu gave it a 39 out of 40, one off of a perfect score. The game sold over 200,000 copies in its first week in Japan, and as of 2018, it has sold over 800,000 units worldwide. It was also nominated for Best Storytelling at the 2018 Golden Joystick Awards. But just because that's the end for Kiryu's story doesn't mean that's the end of Yakuza overall. The next mainline entry in the series would see a drastic but welcomed shift in character and gameplay style. But we'll talk about that next time. Bye, Dad.